In Anchorage, Alaska, two of the world's most controversial and powerful leaders, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, came face to face for a summit that would send shockwaves across the globe. The world watched as history unfolded in real time, with the eyes of millions glued to their screens, waiting to see what would happen when these two titans met on American soil. The air was thick with anticipation, and the stakes could not have been higher. For the first time in over a decade, Vladimir Putin set foot on American soil, defying not only diplomatic tensions but also the shadow of an active international criminal court warrant for his arrest. The arrival was shrouded in secrecy and surrounded by unprecedented security as both nations understood the gravity of this moment. The world's media descended on Anchorage, eager to capture every detail of this extraordinary event. The world watched anxiously as the brutal war in Ukraine loomed over every word exchanged between the two leaders. The ongoing conflict cast a long shadow over the summit, with families, soldiers, and entire nations hoping for a breakthrough that could bring relief or, at the very least, clarity to a world in turmoil. Every gesture, every phrase was analyzed for signs of hope or escalation. The joint press conference that followed only fueled global debate, as the leaders' statements seemed sharply at odds with the grim reality unfolding in Eastern Europe. While both men spoke of dialogue and understanding, their words were met with skepticism by many, who saw the summit as a stage for political posturing rather than genuine progress. Around the world, analysts and citizens alike questioned whether anything meaningful had truly changed. While they spoke of breakthroughs and cooperation, the core disagreements, on Ukraine, on sanctions, on the future of global alliances, remained unresolved. Behind closed doors, advisors whispered urgently, and the atmosphere was tense, as both sides struggled to find common ground. The divisions between the American and Russian delegations were clear, and the world could only guess at what was truly said behind the scenes. The summit quickly became a spectacle of political theater, with flashing cameras, heated debates on live television, and protesters gathered outside the venue. Instead of providing answers, the meeting seemed to raise even more questions about the future of global security, the balance of power, and the possibility of peace. The world was left to interpret the symbolism and rhetoric, searching for meaning in a sea of uncertainty. As the leaders departed Anchorage, boarding their separate planes and leaving behind a stage still echoing with unanswered questions, the world was left to wonder. Was this a genuine step toward peace, a fleeting moment of diplomacy, or the beginning of a darker, more uncertain chapter in global affairs? Only time would tell what the true legacy of this historic meeting would be. Anchorage, Alaska, was chosen for its powerful symbolism, a remote neutral ground bridging the U.S. and Russia, a place where the past and present intersect in dramatic fashion. Alaska stands as a living reminder of the complex relationship between these two nations, its very geography a testament to the thin line that separates them. The decision to meet here was not just about logistics, but about sending a message to the world, that even in the most unlikely places, dialogue is possible. Separated only by the narrow Bering Strait, Alaska and Russia are closer than most realize, at their nearest point, just over 50 miles apart. This proximity has always been a silent reminder of shared history and potential connection, even when politics push them apart. The location signaled a fresh start, far from the entrenched politics of Washington and Moscow. Here, in the vast, untamed wilderness, leaders could step away from the noise and expectations of their capitals, and perhaps see each other and the issues at hand with new eyes. Alaska's history as former Russian territory added another layer, quietly acknowledging a time when the two nations were partners, not adversaries. The echoes of Russian America linger in the architecture, the names, and the culture, reminding both sides of a shared legacy that predates Cold War rivalries. For Putin, arriving on U.S. soil was a diplomatic victory, projecting strength despite his pariah status in the West. His presence in Alaska was a calculated move, signaling resilience and a willingness to engage, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. The stark Alaskan landscape mirrored the gravity of the talks, providing a dramatic stage for high-stakes diplomacy. The snow-capped peaks and endless forests seemed to echo the seriousness of the moment, as if nature itself was bearing witness to history in the making. The setting was strategic, remote enough for security, isolated from the distractions and dangers of the outside world. Here, every movement was watched, every word carefully measured, yet the isolation also offered a rare sense of privacy for candid conversation. Symbolic enough to capture the world's imagination, Alaska became a global focal point. The world's eyes turned to this icy frontier, wondering if it could thaw the chill between two superpowers. The image of these leaders in the last frontier suggested a final chance to explore peace. Their handshake, set against the wild Alaskan backdrop, hinted at the possibility of new beginnings, even in the most unlikely of places. In Alaska's wilderness, history and the future collided. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if old wounds could heal, and if the last frontier could become the first step toward a different tomorrow. Trump and Putin's agenda was dominated by the war in Ukraine, a conflict that had not only redrawn alliances, but also shattered lives and upended the global balance of power. The world watched as cities were reduced to rubble, families displaced, and the specter of war crept across borders, threatening to engulf the region in further chaos. The summit was more than a diplomatic meeting. It was a moment that could alter the course of history. The world hoped for a breakthrough, but the pressure was immense, and the stakes higher than ever. Every word, every gesture, was scrutinized by millions. Journalists from every corner of the globe gathered, their cameras capturing the tension in the air. Leaders and citizens alike held their breath, aware that the decisions made here could mean the difference between escalation and peace. Beyond Ukraine, economic ties and crippling sanctions were on the table, with Putin seeking relief from measures that had battered Russia's economy and isolated it from the West. The energy markets trembled as gas pipelines and trade routes became bargaining chips, and the world's financial systems braced for the ripple effects of any new agreement or confrontation. Trump, meanwhile, wielded threats of harsher penalties, determined to use America's economic might as leverage. He spoke with characteristic bravado, signaling that the United States would not back down easily. The message was clear. Compromise would come at a cost, and the world's largest economy was prepared to act. Nuclear weapons loomed large as both leaders discussed the urgent need for new arms control agreements amid rising fears of escalation. The threat of a new arms race haunted the talks, with treaties fraying and trust in short supply. The world remembered the lessons of the past, hoping that dialogue could prevent catastrophe. This summit was about more than policy. It was a contest for global influence and respect. The eyes of the world were fixed on the stage, where every handshake and every word carried symbolic weight. The outcome would send ripples through capitals from Washington to Moscow, Beijing to Berlin. Putin aimed to prove Russia couldn't be ignored, determined to reassert his nation's place on the world stage. He projected confidence, rallying his delegation and signaling to his people that Russia would stand firm against Western pressure. Meanwhile, Trump sought to showcase his deal-making prowess, eager to demonstrate that he could secure concessions and protect American interests. For him, the summit was a stage to display strength, resolve, and the art of negotiation. Every gesture was a move in a high-stakes game for the future of the international order. The negotiations unfolded like a grand chess match, with each side calculating risks and rewards, aware that a single misstep could have consequences for generations. The world watched, knowing the outcome could shape decades to come. As the summit drew to a close, uncertainty lingered, but so did hope. That dialogue, even in the darkest times, could still light the way toward peace. Putin arrived in Alaska with clear, uncompromising demands. He insisted on formal recognition of Russia's control over annexed Ukrainian territories, including Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Ukraine, he demanded, must adopt permanent neutrality, renouncing NATO and any military alliances. For Putin, these were non-negotiable, aimed at creating a buffer zone and halting Western influence. He also sought relief from crippling Western sanctions, offering possible cooperation on nuclear arms as leverage. The summit itself was a propaganda win, breaking his diplomatic isolation and projecting legitimacy. Images of Putin with Trump sent a message: Russia remains a global power. For Putin, the symbolism of the meeting was as important as any agreement. The world saw a leader determined to reshape the map and the rules of global power. Trump's approach was bold. He promised to end the Ukraine war, claiming he could do it in 24 hours. He bypassed traditional diplomacy, believing direct talks with Putin were the fastest path to peace. Trump pushed for a three-way meeting with Ukraine's Zelensky, but his deadline passed with no progress. He used a carrot-and-stick strategy, offering prestige and renewed relations, while threatening harsher sanctions. Trump also saw the summit as a chance to reduce U.S. aid to Ukraine and fulfill his America First agenda. But his gamble risked legitimizing Putin and raised fears he might accept terms favoring Russia. The press conference only deepened concerns that peace might come at Ukraine's expense. In Ukraine, President Zelensky saw the Alaska summit as a betrayal, not a step toward peace. He condemned the meeting, arguing it handed Putin a propaganda victory and sidelined Ukraine from decisions about its own future. Zelensky insisted, "Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine." He rejected talks while his country was under attack, calling Putin's demands a demand for surrender, not negotiation. Days later, Russia launched a massive new assault, confirming Zelensky's fears that the summit was a smokescreen. He pleaded with allies for more sanctions, military aid, and a halt to Russian energy purchases. For Zelensky, victory meant Ukraine's survival as an independent nation. As long as Ukraine resisted, he declared, it was winning. Hopes for peace were shattered days after the summit, as Russia unleashed a record-breaking drone and missile assault on Kyiv and cities across Ukraine. Over 800 drones struck strategic and civilian targets, including a direct hit on a government building in Kyiv. The attacks killed civilians, injured dozens, and left buildings in ruins, a brutal reminder of the war's reality. The assault was seen as a defiant message. Russia would not be swayed by diplomacy. Critics called the summit a failure, arguing it gave Putin cover for renewed violence. Calls for stronger Western support for Ukraine grew louder. The path to peace, it seemed, would be long and violent. The Alaska summit left the world at a crossroads. No breakthrough, only deeper divisions and uncertainty. Russia's demands and Ukraine's resolve remain irreconcilable, and the war shows no sign of ending soon. The massive assault after the summit suggested Putin believes in force, not compromise. Some hope the talks kept diplomatic channels open, but most see a protracted, bloody conflict ahead. Ukraine's survival now depends on Western aid and international unity. The summit exposed the challenge of negotiating with a leader who sees war as a tool, not a last resort. The world braces for a long struggle, hoping for peace but preparing for more violence. The quest for a just, lasting peace is far from over.